top shelf.
Hello and welcome to Top Shelf Board Games. I'm Hubba.
I'm Sabrina.
And today we're going to review Dungeons of Infinity by Jack Sporner. This is a game that will be coming to Kickstarter in the next couple of months. And so everything that you're going to see is in prototype format. The artwork, the components, and just the tokens and all that. It's all in prototype format. All that could change by the time the Kickstarter gets here or by the time it finishes. I know the artwork alone is going to be changing. Jack says that when the Kickstarter is funded, that the art's going to get overhauled. But as far as all the components and stuff, that could change as well. Let's go to the table and take a look at the game. All right, in Dungeons of Infinity, you play as different heroes, and you'll be running around the dungeon, exploring it and interacting with the different tokens on the board. And there's multiple different heroes that you can play as, each with their own unique stats and cards that they can use, abilities as such. So you have the warrior. He's got there's an experience bar, you got a level tracker, you got a health tracker. You have the boss event over here. This basically is how he generates noise basically and dictates how many boss event cards you'll have to draw at the end of his turn. Every time you do a combat action, you'll have to draw one of those boss events. Every time he does a move action or a run action, he'll have to do a boss event draw. Each hero also has different body armor and different things they can carry. For instance, the warrior can carry an axe, a knife, a sword, or a shield. For the body, he can wear anything that has the keyword armor. For feet, he can wear the Sabatron or sandals. And in his right hand, he can carry an axe, a knife, or a sword. So that allows you to customize your characters quite a bit. You could do dual wielding swords. He could do a sword and a shield. You could carry dual wielding axes, or mix and match. The thief has a little bit of a different setup. He's more knife, swords, armor, sandals, things like that. He can't do the axes or the shields. Also at the top of the hero's board is the hit chance. This is what a character has to roll when attacking an enemy. So in other words, he would have to roll a 1 to 15. Some of the enemies will modify that and reduce it, but his base stat is a 1 to 15. Noise, sometimes the boss, once the boss has appeared in the dungeon, the boss will oftentimes move towards the noisiest person. He produces one noise, so he's a pretty quiet hero to play as. Makes sense as he's the thief. Also, this is how much damage they would do. His base damage is 2, but any swords or other things that he has equipped can also increase that damage. The defense is how much resistance he basically has against damage that he takes, which can also be modified by armor, etc. And then this is how many action points your character has. The thief has 5 action points, which is quite a bit. That determines how many actions you can take. It also determines, it modifies the enemies that are attacking you and reduces their hit chance when they attack the thief. We have the paladin. The paladin, and over here in this section, this basically dictates what the hero is weak to. So he's weak to fire and he's weak to ice. So if he takes fire damage or takes ice damage, he's actually going to take an extra damage. The paladin is more of the heavy hitter. He has more defensive abilities. He can modify things like that. He has different cards, in which I'll go into those in just a second. He can be heavily armored. He can wear robes. He can do the staff. He can kind of do whatever you want. So he can be whatever type of, fantasy character you want to create. He can do. He's very versatile in that regard. And then you got the mage, the wizard. She's pretty standard. She can only carry staffs, robes, and sandals. And 14 hit points or hit chance, 3 power, 4 actions, and a little bit different as far as that goes. This is also the experience tracker. Every time your experience marker reaches the new level, you'll increase your level. You'll also increase your health and regenerate back up to your health. So this is an interesting way to level up your character as you play the game. And like I said, each character has a deck of cards. And in this deck of cards, it basically gives you different abilities that you can do. So we'll take a look at some of the warriors. This is actually a level 3 ability. So in order to use this ability, he'd actually have to be level 3. This is how many action points it costs to use this ability. And then up here, sometimes there'll be a range that'll determine if they can attack, 2 or 3 range. In this case, there is no range on this one. It's just a close quarter type thing. Down here determines the bonus that you're going to get. So this one would actually get a +6 damage. But he won't be able to use it until he's level 3. That's why level 1 and 2 are empty. This whirling jump allows him to attack up to 3 adjacent enemies with the added power based on the level. So that he would add 6 power to his base power, which is the damage you'll ultimately do. Power Dash is a level 2 ability. This allows him to dash in there and attack the first row enemies. And it's a guaranteed hit, and you'll add the power based on the level. And then the enemy behind this enemy is attacked with the lower power, so he actually gets to hit both rows with this attack. The first row with 8 power, the second row with 6 power, plus any modifiers you're using. Into the Fray allows you to attack adjacent targets with added power. Costs less action points. And he's got Bash Chest, allows him to break chests open. And Intimidating Presence doesn't cost anything. And let's see. Strong Constitution, this is going to increase his ability to take hits. When your health is reduced to 3, 2, or 1, you'll heal the amount based on the level. So if he was a level 4 Paladin, he would heal 8 by using this ability. The Power Rage. Something that's unique on these abilities is that down here at the end of your turn, you can assign action points. So this costs 3 action points to use. But say you had 2 action points left over that you didn't want to use, you could take your little marker and save those 2 action points for this ability. And then at the beginning of your next turn, the first thing you'll do is finish off activating this power by spending just 1 more action point. So this allows you to save some action points and start an ability and then finish it on the next turn. And each hero has their own deck of cards with the different things that allow them to basically modify their power, their damage, modify their hit chances, do magic damage of poison, ice, fire, etc. Which, depending on the enemy they're fighting. She can heal. She can discover rooms without actually moving into them. Add more power. She can make it harder to hit her. And the Paladin, like I said, he can do poison damage, fire explosion. He has Ice Hand, poison spray. He can dispel mist that's causing negative effects in a room, and do different things like that. In Dungeons of Infinity, you're going to be exploring this dungeon. You'll start on this starter tile, typically for most dungeons. This is also where you can interact with the merchant. Anytime you move into another room, you'll explore it basically in the dark. You'll flip it over. When you move in to explore a tile, you'll draw a tile off the tile deck, and you'll look at it and look at the number. This is a 4-2. And you'll place it with the blue arrow. You'll place that blue arrow next to where the hero is entering at. So it shows the hero entered from this direction. That's where the blue arrow would go. Also with the 4-2 down at the bottom there, you can consult the room content chart and look for room 4. Room 4, or tile 4, means that you need to place a body item on this tile. So we would take one of these body tiles and place it onto this tile. Now these different tiles is basically how you're going to interact with the game and discover what's in each room and each dungeon as you explore through the game. The action point she could use is to interact with this body. If she interacted with that body, she'd come up here and draw one of the cards off the body deck, and it would determine what happens. So in this case, she would have got a health potion, and she'd spend an action point to pick it up. It's worth 1 gold. If she was to go to the merchant and turn it in, it'd be worth 1 gold, or she can keep it and gain 5 health whenever she uses it and then discard it. Sometimes negative things will happen, but that's how you'll interact with things on the board. Sometimes you'll have to draw enemies to fight. When you draw enemies to fight, it might be 2 or 3 enemies, and you'll take the enemies and you'll put them above your player card. And for each row of enemies that you make, you'll put a reward card. So when you defeat this row, you'll unlock the reward. So it's kind of a loot drop system that allows you to gain new items, new equipment, new special things by defeating the hordes of enemies. You'll never put more than 3 in a row. If you need to put more than 3, you'll start a second row, add another reward card, and so on. Each enemy has a life. They have their hit chance, and then the white dice is what modifies your hero's hit chance. So if he had a 1 or a 2 there, it would reduce her hit chance by 1 or 2, but in this case it doesn't. Their damage is down here. If he does successfully roll and hit, he'll do 4 damage. He also is doing ice damage. Where she is weak to ice, she would take extra damage if this frost spider actually hit her. The frost spider has 3 defense and is weak to fire. So that's kind of how those cards work. And combat is really simple. When she goes to do combat against, she'll choose one of these enemies to attack and just simply roll the dice. And she's looking to get a 1 to 14. In this case, rolling a 19 would fail. If she had more action points, she could continue to attack. Now, one of the things you're going to be doing is every time you attack, every time you use some of the card abilities, you're going to be gaining experience points. So you'll keep track of that. If I was to hit the frost spider, I would move my experience tracker up 1. If I'd used, a poison sword for one of my other characters, you'd move up. And that's what you'll be doing. That's how you'll be gaining experience points. There's a whole array of different bosses. Right now, the artwork is pretty similar for some of them, but once this game's funded on Kickstarter, they plan on adding more variety to the artwork. There's also a whole giant deck of different reward cards that you can get. Armor, swords, knives, shields, that all have different powers, different abilities, and do different things for your heroes. There's also the bosses that'll be coming onto the board. Like I said, anytime you do one of these actions, you'll draw a boss event card. The boss event card, basically you'll look at the top portion of it, and if the number matches a tile of a room that's already out, then the boss will appear in that room. Otherwise, you'll just ignore it. Once the boss is in play, then you'll only look at the bottom portion of this, and it'll tell you how that boss is going to move, which direction he's going to go, etc. There's also different tiles. If you're interacting with the chest, you'll draw from the chest deck. If you're interacting with a rubble tile, you'll interact with that. If you go into a room that has mist, you'll draw from the mist deck. And you can also come back to the merchant and spend action points to purchase items from the merchant. There's keys, there's scrolls, there's health potions, there's rope, there's all sorts of different things. Let's go over some of the actions you can do. In this game, there is a ton of different actions that you can do. You can cut a rope. You can escape from player versus player combat. You can interact with a merchant. You can open a chest. You can interact with debris. You can shout to make noise. You can trade with players. You can dig out of a room that's caved in. You can examine bodies. You can install an orb into a weapon. You can pick up items. You can retreat from combat monsters. You can sneak. You can use abilities. You can use rope. You can use rope to climb across water that's flooded a room. You can equip items. You can examine debris. You can do normal attacks. You can place orbs into a weapon. You can run, which allows you to move faster through rooms. You can start abilities, which I mentioned, and then finish them on the next turn. Or you can use an orb that you have. There's tons of different actions that you can do. And basically anything you do in the game is going to require an action. The game also comes with a wealth of tokens to indicate rope that's been placed, to indicate debris, to indicate damage that's been done to characters, where the different tokens are at, debris, chests, etc. Different modifiers. Sometimes you'll lose health, or tiles will affect the action points that you have, or your movement, or your drawing ability. You also have your coins that you can collect by turning in gold that you find throughout the dungeon, or weapons and armor that you want to turn into the merchant. You can get coins and use those to buy more items. So in this game, there's a ton to do. The game also has a scenario and mini campaign guide. So you can play either a random dungeon setup, like this one, where it's just completely random, or you can play through different little scenarios. There's also a mini campaign called The King's Daughter, which is a three scenario story driven campaign where as you play through the dungeon, you'll discover new items or new story elements. The game also comes with a reference guide. It's got about 52 pages of rules and references to different things in the game, and just a faster way to find a specific thing you're looking for. There's also a quick start guide that helps you to set up your first game and run through the first couple of actions. So, a lot to do in this game. Let's go back out and talk about our opinions on it. Okay, so Dungeons of Infinity is quite the expansive dungeon crawl experience. The game can be played in two different ways. You can do kind of the random generation of the dungeon, where as far as the rooms come out, it's random. As far as what tokens come out and which rooms is random. And you can play that way. And then there's like little quests that you're trying to accomplish, or goals for each scenario. So you can go more of the scenario-based, individual scenario-based with the random dungeon, or you can do more of the
there's a campaign.
The story campaign. The base game is going to come with a 3-scenario mini campaign of The King's Daughter. And that has pre-built dungeons and as a story element that goes into it that isn't present in the random generation of the game. So there's two different ways to play it. I actually really enjoyed we played the random generation multiple times, and that was fun. But I actually had a blast with the story-driven part of it, which I didn't think I would like as much, because I like more the random generation where every time you come play it's different. But the story provided a different take to playing the game that I actually enjoyed, in part because you didn't know the story all up front. As you're playing through the King's Daughter campaign, you're leveling up your hero and you get to carry your stats over to the next scenario, which is cool. But as you're playing, you're searching for, the item in one of the chests. And then once you find it, then you get to go read more of the story and more of the game unfolds. And it's that way with the second and third scenarios of that. So as you're playing through the game, when you find different things or you do different things, you'll trigger different events that will give you more story. They'll progress the game to either add in a boss or add in maybe something crumbled, a room crumbled, and now you're trapped. So it adds in that story element in that way, which I thought was really cool and pretty unique. We don't play a ton of dungeon crawls in this that play like this one, but I thought that was really cool and added to just that overall story you got on top of the story of your character progressing and encountering different monsters.
What I did enjoy was that even though we may have completed or finished the quest, we could have went through the rest of the dungeon and kept searching through the debris or the bodies and kept fighting and leveling up our characters if we wanted to, which that probably is normal in dungeon crawlers. I'm not sure, but I liked that we had the option to do that.
Right. The fighting is, at first I wasn't sure if I was going to like it. The cards, that you put out the cards in front of your guy. But it actually worked really cool. It made it to where every time you fought enemies, you always had a different combination of enemies. You might have spiders, you might have skeletons, you might have skeleton archers, mages, and any combination of that, and they're always in different orders. So you never fight the same horde of enemies. And it did give you that horde feel, which I thought was really cool. The reward system, where as you defeat the rows of enemies, you unlock the reward or the loot drop from that group of enemies. I really enjoyed that aspect as well. It did give me kind of that Diablo-ish feel. I always talk about Diablo when we're talking about games that are like this, but that's because I'm always looking for a game that gives me that Diablo feel of fighting hordes of enemies that use magic and poison and different elements, and then the loot drops. And then this game has that in it. It's done differently than I've thought about, but I really enjoyed it.
I think they brought it into the game really well. And the reason why we got this game was because you made that comment that you wish there was a game out there that did loot drops and that did Diablo kind of fill. And I think that it actually did accomplish that. Like, you could see the group of hordes, and I can come in and grab certain people from yours, which I like, which is kind of what you do anyways in the other games or Diablo. But it helped you work together. But I also...
Well, and when you're playing the competitive game, you could come into my room and just sneak through and not pull any enemies towards you, which is cool as well.
But you can sneak. Yeah.
Right. In this game, with all the actions that you have available, it kind of immerses more into the game too. I mean, the actions you can do, there's a ton. It's almost a little overwhelming, but if the room floods, well, now you can go buy a rope and put a rope up and scale across that flooded room. So things like that are really cool to add to the overall theme of the game. We mentioned the poison, the ice, the elemental damage in the game. I thought was implemented really well. It's very simple. You just add that extra damage, but it was enough that it made it cool when I found that sword that gives me now poison damage or
the staff that does ice or fire. At the same time, or you can choose what you're going to throw at that person.
What really brings the game to life too, and kind of does give it that Diablo-ish feel that I was looking for, is the deck of cards that each hero has. Each hero only has those 8 cards, but that gives you your unique abilities that you can use, and you can use them over and over again, and they do different things. You would think right off the bat that you have one card that's really awesome, you're just going to use that all the time, but when you're fighting different hordes of enemies, it requires a different approach. Some of them, might be totally weak to ice. The whole group might be. So now you're going to do more of your ice attacks. Whereas now this horde has more poison, weaknesses. So you can morph your strategies and the cards you use to the horde that you're fighting, which is really, really neat.
I did enjoy that. I felt like we used our abilities differently than I normally would in any other game. Like, I used my abilities to help weaken the monsters, so then you can go in and do your big hits. Mm-hmm. And so I think it made it more, I guess, strategic in how we interact with the monsters and with each other. I really liked that, because there's times I wouldn't want to use those powers. I'm like, why would I ever use that? But then I did end up using it because I was like, oh, it does this in this group, but I can't do a lot of damage, but I can help. So I really liked my character.
Well, in the paladin, you can add defensive boost to everybody that's in the room, which is good. That can be really beneficial if you're fighting a boss or if you're fighting a really strong horde of enemies.
Well, and I always play a healer. No matter what I do, I end up playing a healer, and so it's always good to have a healer. So, but I felt like each card represented the character. I felt the characters were built really well. There wasn't anything that's like, oh, I wish I missed that. But
well, there was times when you're playing a different character, you're like, man, I wish I had that ability from the other character. For instance, the thief can just open up chests. He can pick them.
That's true.
That's just something he can do that's really easy. So you don't have to go around and find the key. If you're the mage, you can't open a chest without a key. You got to go find the key. So there's sometimes you miss little things like that, but that's what's cool about the different heroes. And I really like that the heroes, they can't all just equip whatever you want. They are limited to a point, which at first I thought was gonna bug me. But as we were playing, it worked. It made it to where the mage still had to keep fairly true to the mage class. you could go with the staffs, you could go with the robes, the sandals, things like that. You could do a little bit of tweaking. You could go double staff, or you could just do a 1-2-handed staff, but you had to keep relatively true to the class of a mage. Whereas the thief had a little bit more freedom. He could carry a knife and a sword, or he could carry 2 swords, or he could, he could wear armor. But the paladin, he could do just about anything. He could carry an axe and a sword, or he could do double swords, or he could do a knife and a sword, or a shield and a sword. He could do basically whatever customization you wanted.
Well, I liked that the rewards, you didn't know what the rewards were going to be. So it was, even though he was the ones fighting the monsters, it could have been for me, for the mage.
Right.
And so,
because if you kill that last enemy and then you run out of action points, well, that loot drop, that reward sits there in the room until somebody comes and picks it up. So yeah, she can come into the room, and if we're playing a competitive game, she can just run in there and steal that reward from you, even though you just fought that entire horde. So you have to manage your action point usage wisely. Likewise, when you search a debris or you search a body, you want to make sure that you got one more action point left over. So if you do end up fighting an enemy, they don't just get a free hit on you. So you can actually fight back before. And
I liked that. I liked that you didn't know what was going to happen. Like, oh, let me search, and there's a bunch of monsters that are going to come after me, or that's some gold, or
the room chart was a really cool idea to implement total randomness to the game while being able to introduce a ton of different things. I mean, really the options and the ability to expand this game is infinite, hence the Dungeons of Infinity. This game really is infinitely expandable with the mechanisms that are there. Even if you like customizing your own things in games, you could add in your own cards, you could add in your own stuff to this game because of the mechanisms that are used.
Well, and I really
that room chart that shows you, place a body here, place a debris here. You still don't know what's in that debris, but now there's this giant deck that is attached to that debris token. So you'll never see the same things in the same, in a game.
In the same order.
Every game will be completely different.
What I really liked is that you had less tiles, but each tile was different because of the room chart. Mm-hmm. So number 14 isn't always going to have a body in there. It depended on the room chart what was going to be in that room.
Right.
So I really thought that was smart of the creator to do that.
Now the components, obviously they can change. This is prototype format, so obviously a lot of the components can change. Not a huge fan of just cardboard standees. That's just a personal preference of mine. It kind of takes away from the big boss feel when you're fighting a big, the demon fire lord or whatever he is, or the big giant ogre, but all you see is this little cardboard token. I mean, obviously all that could change with the Kickstarter, depending on stretch goals funding. I don't know how it resets it up, or maybe it'll just stay as cardboard standees. But
I mean, it is good artwork, but I am prone to miniatures. Mm-hmm. I really like it just adds more of that. Like when we play Zombicide, it just makes it more like, we're in a room of tons of bosses and people, and it just makes it more thematic.
And I don't think you'd be able to add miniatures for the cards of the enemies that you're fighting, just because of the way it's set up. But I think that's okay. But I think the boss and the heroes. It would be cool to have miniatures for those guys, just because you're actually physically moving them on the board and interacting with them on the dungeon. Mm-hmm. So I think for those, miniatures would be cool. The enemies, it'd be pretty hard to have miniatures for that. I don't think you really need to, because of the way it's the mechanism of how it works. The artwork looks good. I know it's going to get overhauled. I think I mentioned that earlier, but it's going to get overhauled with the funding of the Kickstarter. And let's see, anything else? Some things I didn't like. Okay, there's not a lot that I didn't like, but it was a rough rule book to get through. It took me, I had to read through it a couple of times before I felt like I kind of knew what was going on. There is a reference guide or reference sheets that each player gets. I don't remember really using them very often. I think the only part we really used
Was the actions.
was the action point down at the bottom of the card, all the different actions you could do because that was laid out. I wish on those cards that there was a section for how you gain XP, because it felt like the first couple of games I wasn't really sure if we were getting XP when we should have. At the bottom of the cards you use from your guys' abilities, it'll say gain 1 XP for using that card. But also, after playing a couple of times and then reading the rulebook again, we noticed that when you hit an enemy, you also get an XP for that. And so there was confusion sometimes.
Like we house ruled.
Yeah, there was confusion on some of the things like that as far as, are we getting XP for this? Are we not getting XP for that? And you kind of had to search around to find those little areas of when you're getting that XP. And maybe I just missed it in the rules reference guide. The rules reference guide is done kind of in alphabetical order. So if you're looking for something like treasure, you can go in there and find it pretty easy. Or merchant, that keyword, you can go into the reference guide and find merchant and things that go along with the merchant, which was good. But it just felt like the quick start guide too helped get into the game and get the feel of how a turn and rounds worked. But it was almost like there needed to be one more just generalized rule book of all the basic rules. And then here's the quick start of how to play, how rounds kind of work. And then here's the reference guide when you are playing the game, but now you have a deeper question. Not that we really need more rule books thrown into a game, but it almost felt like for this one, it needed something more, something different. Maybe just the rule sheet or the reference sheet just laid out differently to show more of that stuff that you're kind of, like you said, it felt like we were kind of house ruling stuff at the first of it, which doesn't bother me too much because I'm fine with that.
So what I enjoy about the game was I do like the exploring and the interaction of the board and the characters, and it was really thematic for me, and I really enjoyed that. It really had a good story. When we were going through just doing the randomized quests, there was like side quests too that you just you search a body or something, and then you have like a side quest that you can go and do. So you can keep that with your character and then complete that later on. I really did enjoy that. So it added more, because I love Elder Scrolls and all that type of thing, and so it kind of made me feel like it was my side quests and doing those kind of things. So I really did enjoy that. So it was like a dungeon crawling, obviously, going in and doing the little side quests.
Right, and that yeah, because you had your quest you're working on, I have my quest we're working on, and then depending on if we're playing competitively or cooperatively, that also changes our interactions with the game, with each other. And then you can, are we stringing multiple scenarios together for our own custom, campaign? That also changes kind of how everything interacts and carries on. So I think overall, there's just a really good story element to the game that implements a lot of randomness and a lot of new events or new abilities or weapons or bad guys, whatever it is. There's a lot of randomness brought into it, but it's done. That's not how I'm just trying to describe it.
Well, you mentioned that there's a lot of game to such a. How did you word that once?
Right, that's what I'm trying to say. There's a ton of game in this box. It's packed into a very simplistic way of exploring it. You don't have everything just out there. You don't have all these side quests that you can do. They show up randomly, and it's everything. That's the way the monsters come out, the way the loot comes out. It's all very simply laid out, but yet provides a huge infinite wealth of expandability and customization, that's the tipping point for me for this game of why I think it's a really good game. That I think if you like dungeon crawls, if you like customization, if you like fighting random hordes of enemies, if you like loot drops, what else? If you like
side quests,
side quests, rewards, you like story elements,
interaction, doing whatever you want to do.
You want to go,
I want to go dig up dirt.
You want to go fight your buddy? That's fine. Yeah. If you want to work cooperatively, that's fine too. This game has everything in it, and it's done in a fantasy way, and it's all brought in pretty, once you understand the rule book, it's brought in, the mechanics of it are pretty simple. So if that's something that, you are interested in, if you like that type of game, if you like D20 combat, rolling a 20-sided dice for combat, where you have to roll between 1 and 10 or 1 and 15 or whatever, with a little bit of addition and, from the modifiers. There's not a ton of modification, so it's not overly heavy as far as, what modifiers do what. It's pretty simple. It's pretty just basic. But if you like that type of style of game, this is a really good game to go check out. Highly recommend checking it out. All right, guys. Thanks for watching our episode today. Remember to like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, and remember to subscribe to our channel.
And share with your friends.
And also check out our other videos. And thanks so much for watching.
Bye.
Bye.